So unless you've been living in a sewer for the last couple of years, you'll know that Captain Mar-Vell is the next big entry into the MCU lineup, scheduled for international release on March the 8th, 2019. As the first female-led MCU movie, Captain Mar-Vell's generated a fair bit of hype and its share of controversy in the past year or so. Mar-Vell have made it clear in numerous press releases and interviews that they see Captain Mar-Vell as the centrepiece of the post-Endgame MCU, and that she's basically intended to be the next Tony Stark. This puts a lot of pressure on the movie to succeed, both critically and financially. More important, it puts a lot of pressure on the character to endear herself to audiences if they're going to be following her adventures for the next 5 or even 10 years. She's got some very big shoes to fill and not a lot of time in which to do it. So all of this comes down to one big question: will she succeed? Will Captain Mar-Vell be the next Wonder Woman, or will she become this year's Ghostbusters 2016? Well, let's break this situation down and see if we can't arrive at a conclusion. In order to do this, I'm going to compare the source material, production history, casting, commercial potential and wider cultural context of Captain Mar-Vell against another successful female-led superhero movie and see how it stacks up. Now, female-led superhero movies are still something of a rarity these days. Yeah, we had Elektra and Catwoman back in the 2000s, but both of those films bombed hard, both critically and commercially. The best and most relevant comparison I can draw is 2017's Wonder Woman, starring Gal Gadot. Both movies released into established cinematic universes, both were led by female directors, and both enjoyed their share of controversies around the casting of the main character. There are obvious parallels to draw here, so let's get into it. Wonder Woman is a character created by DC Comics way back in 1942. She's an immortal demigod from the Amazonian island of Themyscira. She possesses super strength, endurance, immortality, and the lasso of truth that allows her to easily interrogate captured enemies. She'll fight when she has to, but her personality is centered around compassion and love for others. She tries to see the best in people, and as a result she often brings out the best in them. The character ultimately joined the Justice League to fight evil in the world, and over the years became one of DC's Holy Trinity alongside Batman and Superman. What's interesting to note is that her basic costume, personality and appearance hasn't really changed much since her initial creation more than 70 years ago. In short, the character worked. Now let's take a look at Captain Mar-Vell. Well, that's easier said than done, since there's been about 6 Captain Mar-Vells in the Marvel comics alone, never mind Shazam from DC, but for the purposes of this video we'll focus on the current incarnation, Carol Danvers. Danvers first appeared in Marvel Comics in 1968 as a US Air Force pilot. She encounters the super powerful Kree warrior Mar-Vell, and her DNA gets fused with his during an explosion that seriously injures her. She ultimately comes back as Captain Mar-Vell, a superhuman fusion of 2 different species with immense strength, speed, reactions, the ability to travel at the speed of light, fly through space and manipulate cosmic energy to fire blasts of plasma from her hands. In short, Miss Danvers can do quite a bit. The character's been redesigned and relaunched multiple times over the years with varying degrees of success, most notably in the early 2010s when her outfit was made considerably less revealing and her physique was altered to a more muscular, androgynous look. Her hair was also cut short and she was given a colder, more aggressive and confrontational persona. This change was in line with Marvel's decision at the time to pursue a more socially progressive agenda in its work, pushing a more diverse cast of heroes and, well, it wasn't exactly a big hit with comic book fans. What we can see here is a general trend over the last few years of Marvel repeatedly trying to rebrand and push an unpopular character into main event status, often at the expense of established characters like Iron Man, Thor and Captain America. The general litmus test for the success of these 2 characters is to compare their household recognition. Most average people who have no particular interest in comics or superheroes could still tell you who Wonder Woman is, but the same can't be said of Captain Mar-Vell. She simply isn't that popular. Now, let's consider the movie adaptations of both of these characters. Wonder Woman, played by Israeli actress and former model Gal Gadot, first appeared as part of the DC Extended Universe in the controversial movie Batman vs Superman. Fans were less than enthusiastic when they first heard of Gadot's casting as Wonder Woman, feeling variously that she was too thin to portray the powerful Amazonian warrior, that her prominent accent would be a problem, and that she lacked the charisma and acting experience to play the part. Gadot, for her part, stayed largely out of the online fray, concentrating instead on training and preparing for the role. Whatever criticisms people had of her, it was pretty obvious she was taking the part seriously and she was determined to do her best. In the end, her hard work paid off and the character's appearance was generally well received. Although her screen time was limited and her character played little part in the movie's story, Wonder Woman had survived her trial by fire. Batman vs Superman ultimately proved a divisive film for fans and critics, and failed to meet box office expectations. Already the DCEU was struggling to find its audience, so fans were even less enthused by the prospect of a Wonder Woman solo movie. But again, Godot and director Patty Jenkins stayed largely above the controversies swirling around the troubled DCEU, and instead focused on making their own movie. This strategy paid off big time. Wonder Woman opened to rave reviews and over $100 million in its opening weekend, ultimately going on to earn more than $800 million worldwide. Godot's performance and the character's compassion and optimism in the face of the horrors of World War I endeared her to audiences, and the film's success proved a much-needed boost to the struggling DCEU. The little movie that could, did. The film worked not only because it presented a strong, compelling female main character from an all-female warrior society, but it did so without breaking down or humiliating the male characters in the story. It truly was a film that anyone could enjoy, and for once even the internet seemed to call a temporary truce in the endless culture war and just enjoyed the film. It was remarkable. The success of Wonder Woman was helped in no small part by Godot herself. She'd really risen to the occasion, proving her detractors wrong, and for the most part winning them over with hard work, effortless charm and general likability. In interviews and press events, you can really see how happy she is to be there, how proud she is of the character in the movie, and how grateful she is for the fame and success it's brought her. In short, she's warm, approachable and likeable. Now, I'm a drunken, cynical asshole for the most part, but even I can't help but feel good whenever I see her on screen. Now, let's contrast this with Captain Marvel's production history, its place in the MCU, and its star. You don't need me to tell you that the MCU has become a cinematic juggernaut over the past 10 years, with 20 movies and over $17 billion in worldwide ticket sales. The MCU has effectively become a well-oiled money-making machine, with nearly every movie landing well with critics and audiences, and a big roster of popular characters to play with. With the enormous twin successes of Black Panther and Infinity War last year, the momentum of this series is almost unstoppable. But all good things come to an end. Most of the actors who've been around since Phase 1 will be leaving the MCU after Avengers Endgame releases in May 2019, leaving Marvel with the daunting task of carrying on Phase 4 with a fresh cast of characters. And that task falls squarely on the shoulders of Captain Mar-Vell. So compared to Wonder Woman, Captain Mar-Vell has a tremendous advantage in terms of box office hype and momentum. It's coming at a time when the series is white hot in terms of audience anticipation, it stars a far more experienced Oscar-winning actress, and it's got the entire marketing machinery of the MCU behind it. But all is not entirely well in the world of Captain Mar-Vell. Let's investigate. The problems began early on with the announcement that Brie Larson had been cast in the title role. Larson's a rising star in Hollywood who achieved her breakthrough role in the drama Room, winning an Oscar for Best Actress in the process, and co-starred in Kong Skull Island, so she's no stranger to action movies either. Unfortunately, Larson's made some controversial statements on a variety of topics, ranging from feminism to race, diversity in Hollywood, and her vocal opposition to Donald Trump. On one occasion, she dismissed criticism of the movie Wrinkle in Time on the grounds that white men weren't qualified to judge the film's merits, while on other occasions she's advocated for fewer male directors and production staff. She's also recently appeared at the Women's March, which has itself become embroiled in anti-Semitism controversy. Far be it from me to criticise her political opinions, but having the star of a female-led superhero film openly express what many see as anti-male, anti-white sentiments is a pretty difficult proposition for any studio to market. And make no mistake, these sentiments did not go unnoticed by the Marvel fan base. Larson herself certainly hasn't shied away from this controversy, openly stating her disdain for fans critical of her casting and her general dismissal of the whole discussion. In interviews and press junkets, she comes across as kind of aloof and disinterested, like she doesn't particularly care for the character or the opportunity she's been given. Whereas Godot was humble, warm and approachable, Larson appears to be distant, arrogant and ungrateful. The situation wasn't helped when various on-set photos began to leak of Larson in a less than flattering variation of the Captain Mar-Vell costume, looking less than pleased about her situation. Get used to this facial expression, by the way, because we'll be talking about it more shortly. The memes started rolling out immediately, fanning the flames of what was rapidly becoming a controversial project. When the first Captain Mar-Vell trailer dropped, fans were quick to pick up on one particular aspect of Larson's performance. Yeah, it's fair to say her portrayal here isn't exactly varied and engaging. She seems to have the same bored, irritated expression in virtually every scene she appears in. Now obviously a trailer doesn't represent the final product, but it does give us a fair indication of the tone and style the film will employ, and things were not looking good. The mockery began immediately, with the Twitter hashtag #SmileForBrie trending for several days before it was suppressed by Twitter themselves. When one fan released photoshopped versions of Larson with a smiling expression, controversy and debate erupted with accusations of racism and unfair expectations that women should always smile. Larson herself, true to form, entered into the fray by giving other male Mar-Vell characters the same treatment, which only seemed to further annoy her detractors. The criticism wasn't based around her lack of smile, but her lack of emotion in general. The character came across as cold, distant and machine-like, and Larson's attempts to hit back at her critics only added to the impression of her being a humourless, arrogant, out-of-touch actress. The fact that the trailer seemed to place a particularly strong emphasis on female empowerment rather than extolling the virtues of the character as an individual made the situation even worse. Fans familiar with the comic book character and the damage done by Mar-Vell's aggressive pursuit of progressive politics were quick to voice their concerns about where the MCU was headed. The result of all this social media bickering is to create a highly charged, highly politicised atmosphere surrounding what should be a fun, exciting comic book movie. Wonder Woman managed to successfully navigate these troubled waters largely unscathed because its cast and directors were smart enough to stay out of it for the most part, but Mar-Vell have made it clear that their intentions are with this film and many people are unhappy. So what does all this mean? Well, it means Mar-Vell has a fight on its hands to avoid turning this movie into an embarrassing fiasco. They're trying to push an unpopular and relatively unknown comic book character, portrayed by an unpopular and polarising actress, into a divided and highly charged marketplace with a movie already mired in identity politics. Wonder Woman, by contrast, had a well-recognised pop culture icon as its main character, and a likeable, if inexperienced, star who successfully kept away from the identity politics game for the most part. On the plus side, they do have the almost unstoppable momentum of the MCU behind them, and Mar-Vell has yet to release an outright flop, so I don't think they're going to start now. But if recent experience has taught us anything, it's that dabbling in identity politics is to risk fracturing a previously unified audience for very little gain. I mean, look at the mess Star Wars is now trying to fight its way out of. So what will become of Captain Mar-Vell? Well, as I said previously, I think it's virtually impossible for an MCU movie to outright flop at this stage in the game, so I wouldn't expect it to do less than 500 million. No mainstream critic or reviewer is going to risk accusations of sexism by giving this movie a bad rating, so I think we can also expect glowing reviews across the board from the mainstream press. I'd also predict a fairly big opening weekend in the $120 to $140 million range, since despite the controversies, many people are legitimately excited to see this film, and yes, a fair number of them will probably be seeing it because of its feminist overtones. Much like Ghostbusters 2016, seeing this film will probably be viewed as a political act, and stuff like that tends to make a mockery of box office predictions. The real deciding factor here will be if Captain Mar-Vell can sustain this initial momentum. I certainly don't think it will light the same cultural powder keg that carried Black Panther to 1.3 billion worldwide, but where will it end up? Well, my prediction is that it'll do somewhere between $600 and $800 million worldwide by the end of its run. It's not a bad figure by any stretch, and probably enough to turn a decent profit for Mar-Vell, but I think the initial surge of enthusiasm will die away by the second weekend, and we'll see a steep decline after that. Audience scores, indie reviewers and word of mouth are what movies like this rely on now, and if those don't pan out then I'd expect a big fall in revenue. I also think the movie's failure to achieve a decisive box office breakthrough will spark off yet another round of social media warfare, with both sides claiming victory and throwing accusations and insults at each other. The other big issue to consider here is the longer term implications for the MCU. Mar-Vell have made it clear they want Captain Mar-Vell to form the centrepiece of Phase 4, which means she'll be needed for at least 3 or 4 years. A huge blockbuster haul of over $1 billion would certainly cement that plan. But what if this movie doesn't meet those expectations? Would a relatively low figure around the 600 million mark cause them to rethink these plans? Would they be inclined to distance themselves from Captain Mar-Vell if she proves to be too polarising for audiences? These are questions we won't really know the answers to for several years yet, but do let me know your own thoughts and predictions in the comments section, and please consider liking this video if you enjoy my work and you'd like to see more like it. Thanks for your time, and have yourselves a great day.